Hi everyone, hope you're really well. I hope you're enjoying your Monday. It has been a tumultuous weekend. I do not have to tell you that. I'd put this on par with FTX. I put it on par with Luna. I put it on par with COVID. The complete, excuse me, not the complete, the core difference rather is that Bitcoin held up like an absolute champ, and this does appear to be totally driven by perpetuals. And I have some tweets that I want to share with you in a second on exactly how it happened, but it looks like it was the auto deleveraging systems a lot of these exchanges have, where they sell the collateral behind the scenes as a lot of these positions fall, and the market makers did not step in for whatever reason. It was a cascade across all the exchanges. Again, that doesn't really make you feel too good in hindsight, and I'll be perfectly transparent. That's why I wanted to be transparent with you guys in the group. It affected me, not to a great degree, and that's because I have compartmentalization of my risk. And so, time and time again, I have been a little bit concerned over the journey of the ease and the movement towards leveraging up your portfolios, especially in the masterminds and outside, because we need to remember we are in a nascent asset class, and crypto itself is highly volatile, it's highly risky, and we're slapping leverage on top of that. Have to be aware of the risks, and this is what can happen. These kind of moments where exchanges go down or something silly happens, and instead of just holding the spot asset or trading the spot asset back and forth, where, if something like this happened, you would just shrug and just be, okay, I'll wake up the next morning and some of my stuff was about 20, 30% down and now it's rebounding. Okay, great. I'm still in the actual asset. But with leverage, you can lose your entire position in a mass liquidation. Now, in my situation, I compartmentalized the risk. I only had, I think, 10 to 15% of my portfolio on the exchange, which was my dynamic part of my dynamic stack, which is fine. I have, cold storage, I have spot assets elsewhere on different exchanges. Everything on Bybit was specific towards my leverage side trading. Luckily, as well, I had stink bids in place. I wasn't in any active trades, which would have really screwed me. So some of those stink bids were taken as things just went down and then went down another, 60%. I have no idea how my positions were still in play, although I had one position in Tau. But what the exchange did was, and this is what would have happened if you maybe were up watching it. I wasn't, but I saw the next morning what had happened. I had cross margin some assets that were sitting on Bybit, and as the price was just cratering through the floor, my position was open. It took the bids and just kept falling. It was auto selling my collateral down. It was trying to keep me in the position as long as possible. And that's what the system did very well, actually, and kept me in play. So I had probably lost about 70% of the overall collateral position, which sucked. It is what it is, but I was still in the trade and could rebound. So many people did not. There are so many stories about, and I know some masterminds as well, and I do really feel for you. I've lost some significant sums out there, though. There's $50 million being lost, $40 million. I think there was about over 1,000 traders that lost over $5 million. And these are crypto native people where they've bootstrapped some of their portfolio with some leverage. Where we need to change our view on this is leverage can still be used. Leverage can still be used in a smart, strategic manner on shorter term trades. On longer term trades, yes, but what happened overnight was a real strong reminder to try and stay away from cross margin collateralization, because you are bootstrapping a leverage trade with a volatile asset. And if that volatile asset goes down, 80%, which you think it won't, but sometimes it can like that, then your entire position gets wiped, even on a quote unquote low risk position. Whenever you're attaching leverage, you are attaching massive risk to your portfolio. I'll just say that again. So if you were trading in USD, if you had collateralized your trading with USDT, you likely would have gotten out of it okay. But because USDT, if you think about it, it's pegged 1 to 1, it doesn't drop 80%. So your collateral would have been fine. You would have got your stink bids. All you would have had to have been worried about was the liquidation level, which would still have come up. So again, there might have been some trouble, but you're adding that additional volatility of your collateral asset going down 80%, which very few liquidation levels could survive. So the idea here is, if you're leverage trading, set aside some USDT or US dollars to trade. Do not bootstrap those positions with additional risk of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and of course, nothing outside of that. It's a very stark reminder. Also, think of your portfolio as a whole and say to yourself, look, if I put 10% of this into a leverage trade and I lose it all, would I be okay with that the next morning? If you're not okay with that, if it's too big of size of your portfolio, then reduce the percentage. But have that firewall for yourself with whatever you're using on leverage. If it's on Bybit, the amount of cash and capital that's on that exchange is just for leverage trading. Yeah, so it said stay away from cross margin. So I just wrote a few notes here. No more than a certain percentage of your portfolio. And again, that is so important because creating these little systems for yourself will protect you in these moments. Now, thankfully, in my situation, some of you lost a lot of money, might not want to hear this, but thankfully, I woke up, I was still in the trade. I saw a lot of the assets down, or I saw 80% down was at its lowest. But when I woke up, things were still about maybe 50, 60% down. There was still 80% down against Bitcoin. So what I did was opened up a leverage long with what I had left. So I was in Tau, that was down, but it was so far down that I just had to hold it and it was going to bounce back. And this is the thing, when things go down that far, it is such an over extreme. People have blown up, liquidations across the board. Things will come back to those and moderate to those levels. So I open immediately a Sui long because that's what I was saying. I'm like, okay, Sui probably looks like it's been smashed one of the hardest here. I want to ride this back up. So I did, back in the trade. Got a lot of my money back from that. Tau's now above break even. In fact, it's about 70% up. So that's great. So things are moving higher. And I additionally thought to myself, all right, I'm looking at the Bitcoin pairs here. These extremes are still in place. So the USD charts were actually had moderated back by about 50%. They'd gone back up. Those 80% drawdowns weren't available to me. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, I've got some dynamic Bitcoin left on Binance. What do I want to do here? Well, I'm going to melt that dynamic Bitcoin into one of these alts that are 80% down because I think that is just ridiculously overshot to the downside. Melted that in there. Now, come today, a lot of these altcoins and the Bitcoin pairs are now up, 50% from where I bought. So I've made 50% on the dynamic position. I've also recovered a lot of the dynamic leverage position as well. I think I did pretty well out of it compared to a lot of people. And again, it was just a small part of my portfolio. But now I think I'm actually higher. My portfolio is higher than it was, yesterday. Which you look back and go, geez, if I only had some stink bids placed in spot, or if only we had some dry powder free, yes, you could play things better. But I think it matters with how you act in the moment as well. And I'm pretty happy with how I didn't sort of, panicking, oh shit, here we go, and close the laptop and not take any action. I thought, okay, well, this is actually thought really clearly, this is how I'm going to go ahead from here, and made some really good decisions. And now the market's coming right back, which it always happens with FTX and all that. You will hear everyone say that everything's over, it's dead, etc., etc., etc. When in fact it is one of the best times you can buy for a risk reward standpoint. So I won't talk too much more about that, guys. If you've got any questions or comments, if you want to have a heart to heart, or I know a few people reached out for some DMs and some comments. I will say on the flip side of that is, while I do sympathise, we are responsible for all our own actions, and ultimately, it's our financial responsibility. When we take that amount of risk, it's on us to understand what are the actual risks, how can this go wrong, and how are we protecting ourselves. Use this as a massive learning lesson. Use it as your body armor going forward, because there is no one to blame. There's no bank, there's no insurance company. No one's here to save you. So you need to buffer yourself and be sensible with what you're doing, because we may now well have that Q4 banana zone that we're all afterwards, but everyone's been taken out in body bags, and you miss the chance to a great degree. So it's important to pick your moments, reduce risk where possible, and go from there. All right, let's crack in. I will get to those tweets. Don't want to spend too long on this, because let's move forward with positivity and energy. So there was a bit of talk around how Trump's tweet was the reason that we had a 80% drawdown. It absolutely wasn't. It was the catalyst to have a drawdown, and Bitcoin got to, I think, 105, which was where the liquidation levels were, funnily enough, which Joe was talking about all through Koh Samui. So while there was on the offering this tariff news, which should drive us down to probably that 110, 105 level, there was absolutely no reason for alts to go to 80%. So let's just remove that from our minds. It was a helpful catalyst that caused some whales to sell. And then there was a I don't know whether it was like a coordinated attack, but we'll get into some of the tweets. But it was almost the perfect timing to cause one of these cascade liquidations in low flows and order books on a Friday evening. Now, Trump's come out today and completely backflipped. So the S&P 500, and I'll just show you the chart here. S&P 500 is back testing the upwards sloping channel, which we've been watching. It came down in ridiculous style. So Bitcoin and crypto reacted on that. So a 3% move down the S&P 500, you'd expect, yeah, probably a 10 to 20% drop in crypto, not 80%. But still, this is still really bullish structure. It tried to break out, tried, then failed on the tariff news, and now we're bouncing pretty hard. I'd expect us to just bounce out of here and move higher after a nice pullback and significant move down. Now that Trump is moderating his talk around tariffs as well. Okay, and this is the TLDR from the crash. So I want to just read this out. So roughly 60 to 90 million dollars of USDE was dumped on Binance, along with WBETH and BN Sol, exploiting a pricing flaw that valued collateral using Binance's own order book data instead of external oracles. That localized depeg triggers 500 million to a billion in forced liquidations, cascaded into 19 billion plus globally, and earned the attackers about 192 million via 1.1 billion in Bitcoin and ETH shorts open on hyperliquid hours earlier, but minutes before Trump's tariff announcement. It wasn't a USDE failure, it was Binance's design flaw, timed with macro panic. Trump's tariffs recover. What looked like chaos was actually a coordinated exploitation of Binance's internal pricing systems amplified by macro shock and systemic risk. So this is painting the picture, and I got another tweet here that this was a coordinated attack. Again, I don't know either way. This is just what smarter people than I are putting together. They knew exactly when to hit it, how to approach it, and how to capitalize on a massive downwards move like that. And it's a bit interesting that it happened just as the Trump tweet came out that would force things to move down, and then they could exploit that and attack these systems. So across the crypto landscape, the reason why something like Atom pretty much went to zero, which is insane, like the market maker just couldn't step in. Exchanges were frozen, sell buy buttons were frozen, like it all just froze up, which is an interesting sort of thought bubble in itself in a serious moment. But it was I guess, the perfect attack to cause a liquidation, and those collateral margin positions. If all the pegs of the stable coins that are flying around here and there, and then also the collateral was being sold off in a deleveraging situation, and the oracles are sort of picking up different price points here and there. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's just like the worst case scenario. This is why crypto does need some form of regulation to stop this kind of shit. And it's why we do have to protect ourselves very seriously. Now, there was another one here that goes into much, much bigger depth of a play-by-play and blow-by-blow. I want to read into it a little bit more, but just that was a good TLDR, that it was a sort of like a perfect storm of an attack vector, which Binance didn't cover, which it does sound like they are understanding on how serious it was for a lot of people. And again, these are crypto natives with hundreds of millions of dollars that were market makers and funds. A couple of funds blew up as well. There's going to be bodies that float to the surface, just like in FTX. And we will see where it goes. But this was a huge, huge deal. A lot of the liquidity in this market, the volumes are down 50, 60%. Again, I would just flip this on its head, because this is the time that, you say buy blood in the streets, buy when everyone's fearful, etc., etc., etc. And when the moment comes, people don't want to borrow it because they are so shit scared. And that is the read for me. That is the absolute read. Leverage is completely gone. Volumes are completely gone. Crypto natives, market makers, they're all shot to hell. People are being carried out in body bags. Some people have taken their own lives from this. I mean, this is the place that we're deciding to invest and trades, because it's so much reward on the table, but there is still so much risk on the table. That is why, again, if you have the fortitude and you have a bit of planning and your risk management, ultimately though, dollar cost averages, people who just spot buy Bitcoin or even just spot buy the assets, when they're going down, dollar cost average over time, you wake up and just sort of shrug and go, that's fine. But when we get into the gambling side of things, the leverage side of things, we have to be so, so careful with how we are approaching this. Okay, I wanted to head on over to check on Chain's dashboard, because we got a really serious plunge. So this is just Bitcoin, of course. So if this was a hodler dashboard for altcoins, oh my goodness, it would be absolutely shocking. Yeah, short-term holder MVRV has gone negative. So the short-term holders of Bitcoin are underwater at the moment. We saw a huge realized puke of Bitcoin as well. So Bitcoin held up the best because obviously the ETFs and people just weren't selling their Bitcoin, and broadly Bitcoin was not leveraged up. It was altcoins. People were hyper leveraging. But again, it wasn't stupid leverage. A lot of people anywhere between 1 and 5x leverage got liquidated. It all depends on the collateral they were using and how far that went down. So no one was really safe again. Funding rates for Bitcoin are actually looking like they might turn negative soon, which is a great bloody sign. Everything has reset, guys. So yeah, this gives me a lot of hope for higher prices. I know that might sound counterintuitive, it might sound ridiculous. You might think we're going into a bear market, but when you get a flush of this magnitude, and we had 2 or 3 flushes before this last month, I mean, it's clearing the absolute decks. I do want to see charts respond and give us some strength. And yeah, I'm hoping this week we'll see that. But again, we just want to pay attention here and not lose our heads and be slow. So Bitcoin had that big move down. Let's just see there. It broke down from this wedge, so we just need to pay attention to because this is a large wedge. I would love for Bitcoin to just hold here above the 200-day moving average, which continues to snake higher. No real alarm there. This is actually forming a strong bullish divergence. Momentum is moving higher, while price actually made a lower low into support, and it's reclaimed the level. So for me, this all looks really good. Again, this is the Max Payne scenario. You wipe everyone, even crypto natives, mostly, and now things just roll higher. I mean, that's kind of the Max Payne scenario for a lot of people. I wanted to have a look at the total market caps as well, just real quick, because some of these retracements were just so utterly brutal. Have a look here. That's my usual chart. Must be. No, everything isn't loading. That's okay. So we're starting to come out of that all-time high. This chart's annoying me. Yeah, this is better. So total three. So we're just starting to move out of the all-time high, and we had an incredible candle outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum. I mean, it's huge. 34%. Tag some of these moving averages, wiped everyone out. My goodness. And then we've closed back above the 20. So we'll see where this goes. But ultimately, when we get a weekly close above that 1.16 trillion mark, again, we're off. It's bananas, but it's the way you got to think. The others chart, absolutely mental. 52% down, trying to recover that now. Wouldn't want to find resistance here because then the smaller alts are going to just continue to bleed out, but just something I'm paying attention to. Okay, let's move on over to the broader market. Ethereum looking really nice, back above 4,000, so that's great. Had a real big retrace back to the trend line. Got to like that. These big moves back to those trend lines, when they do hit, you're like, oh, they're great buy zones, and now they're back into that more bullish state. And I'm looking on the weekly. I don't want to go too far out further than that. XRP doesn't look that flash, as you can see there. BNB has just motored higher. There's probably something in that too, in terms of whatever manipulations going on behind the scenes. But BNB is getting an incredibly strong bid, and that is just insane. 36% down, completely retraces it, now higher than it was before the crash. Bananas, bonkers, all that. So when you buy extreme fear and panic like that, some of the best financial decisions you'll ever make, but you need to be solvent. You need to be alive. Solana actually came down, broke the trend line, but now it's recovered it. Nice. Hype. 200 back above it. Nice. But now it's got a lot of work to do above. We're just having a look across the board here. Sui. Now, this was just apocalyptic. And this is what happened. If you had Sui as collateral, and I did, this is how I have no idea how my trade stayed in play. It's probably because I had stink bids and not bids in play, maybe. But 83% down. There are not too many people that can survive a liquidation of that. And I think I was on 5x. But that is incredible. And I'm seeing when something goes down that far, I mean, and you think it has any fundamental value, you close your eyes and you buy and you close the laptop. All right, Asta, that's an incredible drawdown. I wouldn't be surprised if Asta comes back up here as well. Again, we're going to moderate back to levels that we actually think are fair priced on a lot of this stuff. It is my view over the next little bit. FBTC, so we need to focus on the BTC charts because they are going to show us the recovery. Whatever's strong, that's where we want to be focused. FBTC, still nothing to write home about. I've got an alert there, but this was a really nice movement back into strong support. Grab the liquidity down there, and it's now back to where it should be, I think, and it could really begin to run. If the ETF flows come in reasonably hard from here, I think that's strong. BNB still absolutely killing it. SUI, again, like that's an 80% drop against the Bitcoin pair. And I've got an alert just above where I'll be maybe moving in with a bit more size, but I bought somewhere around here, which was really pleasing. And now we're starting to move higher. So this could be a really lucrative move where I've refilled my bags and increased my position quite significantly in a big crash, which again can quickly recover any lost gains. And I hate to think like that. You shouldn't really think about recovering lost stuff, but it does creep in. It's just human psychology. But I think it was a really sensible trade. If the crash hadn't, sorry, if let's say it didn't lose any money, what would I have done? That's what I asked myself the question in the moment. What do I do here? What's the sensible thing? Okay, 80% down, I buy it. And I did. Solana Bitcoin, yeah, big movement down, but that is really interesting. That's came back down and grabbed all that liquidity at support. Again, a lot of these charts in terms of coming back to core levels, really, really nice. Now, there's a chart here that I was watching this morning, which I thought was absolutely wild. This is Tau. So it was trying to break out of this massive downtrend before the crash, and then we had 65% retracement on Tau, and it's come all the way back. It's looking like it wants to threaten to break out here. And I've been watching Tau because I'm in the trade as well. This downtrend here, it's breaking out against Bitcoin, and that looks like a fairly significant close through the 200 as well, and volume, and that's a really strong move. Can maybe look to layer back in if you're in Bitcoin to try and capture this maybe before it accelerates higher. That's definitely a play, but watch for strength across the board here. If there's any cryptos that are showing any ounce of strength, that's where you want to be focused. So running ahead this week, I think that the tariffs are going to just be sort of in the background, of course. A crash of this magnitude as well can also signal lower liquidity. Now, is that forecasting what happened in the S&P 500? Probably. But is there anything on the radar which we need to just be, mindful of? We'll just have a quick gander, and then I'll duck off. I don't want to be just talking for the sake of it, guys. I'm conscious of that. Okay, yeah. So we have Jerome Powell's speech at 2:50 in the morning on Wednesday, so Tuesday night essentially. That will be very interesting to pay attention to. And as long as everything here continues to look rosy in terms of the rate cuts that are going to continue to happen, then this crash will be soon forgotten. The S&P just has a nice reset. Bitcoin and crypto have a massive reset, but a welcome one. I don't see a problem unless they're having some issues with inflation, et cetera, again. So apart from that, I'm pretty focused and pretty confident that a lot of these assets are going to come back to their previous positions, which will tear everyone's bloody hair out because they've been forced liquidated from their positions. But if you're in spot, I really wouldn't worry too much, and I'd look on a case-by-case basis. Again, I'll probably share this to the VIPs and the graduates as well, just to give that high-level take around what I said a little bit earlier. But also how I see the market. I don't see a problem here. My Q4 is where I see. So the back end of this, again, I think this is a complete head fake to wreck everyone before we get to where we want to go. Again, it might sound really counterintuitive, but just from what I've seen over the years, FTX, Luna, all that, on record liquidations is when markets bottom. So I'm just thinking in my head like that. I'm thinking about, well, what do I want to see for a market bottom? Were we getting frothy before this crash happened? Probably not in many respects, but leverage was quite prolific in a lot of the altcoins, and we were struggling to move higher. We were just sort of meandering, waiting for some kind of catalyst. Sometimes the catalyst can actually be something like this. So just wanted to put that in the back of your minds. Hope you have a wonderful day. I'm going to jump off now. We'll catch you again soon. See you guys. Bye.